So, make a prediction. Take any two lineages that science considers related reasonably closely, and give us some idea what sort of relationship we're looking for.
Okay. Aaron, I'm going to make a prediction. If we have a horse, which science considers related to the donkey, and we take these animals and we allow them to breed, they should produce a creature known as the mule. Now, science has determined that the mule is sterile and cannot have offspring. So this testifies that there are limits to God's creation. He creates each individual kind and holds it within its boundaries. It can have small variations, but it will never be something other than what it is.
That's not a prediction. This prompts me to point out a few errors in your perception. These were covered in the 11th video of my series on the foundational falsehoods of creationism.
In the evolutionary perspective, any single ancestral species can diverge into two or more daughter species, each becoming so distinct that eventually either of the new species would be unable to interbreed with the ancestral and/or sister species anymore. But by ignoring fossil forms, the creationist perspective has that completely backwards, insisting instead on an illusory sequence of separately conjured kinds, which, like information, must remain forever undefined, and they imagine that evolutionary diversity can only occur by mixing these kinds in hybridization. This is another reason they reject transitional fossils and instead demand some blend only between current kinds. Their perspective has no depth. Creationists argue that evolution can only occur within definite limits and then only to subtle variants within their kind. They say new diversity is limited to rare and inviable hybrids between those kinds, and they usually say that the emergence of new species is impossible. Creationists may refuse to acknowledge geologic timescales and cannot admit that any new organism might be unable to interbreed with the stock from whence it came, because their sacred fables say they were created each after their own kind. But of course they can't say what a kind is either, because it's impossible to identify any point in taxonomy where everything that ever lived isn't evidently related to everything else. So they largely ignore phylogenetics altogether. Creationists demand that new species be so different from their parents that one can't even tell they're related. The irony there is that evolutionary theory never suggests that one kind of thing ever turned into another fundamentally different kind of anything, not unless you ignore all the intermediate stages, which of course creationists do.
So GEERUP, show me one time in the whole of evolutionary theory where science suggests that anything became something other than what it is. To paraphrase that, name one time when any new species wasn't still a member of every clade from which it descended. Good luck with that. You know, ignorance is no excuse, and incredulity isn't a valid argument. So if you're going to debate evolution with me, I must insist you at least find out what it is and how it really works. Normally, I would suggest beginning with Berkeley University's introductory primer, Evolution 101. But if any of your information of evolution came from creationist sources, then you should see my series on the foundational falsehoods of creationism first, because everything you know is wrong. For example,
none of these horses here have toes. They all have hooves.
No, GEERUP. All these horses have toes. The oldest of them have 4 toes, dwindling down to 3 toes, and the modern horses have only 1 toe left. One cannot have hooves instead of toes because hooves are just thickened toenails. Everything that has hooves has toes underneath it, like the manatees I showed you earlier. Say, how do you explain the fact that modern manatees have hoof caps on their flippers? How do you explain the transitional fossil manatees that still have all 4 legs with hoof caps on all their toes? Evolution provides the only explanation for any of this.
We have the horse, we have the donkey, and this is testable. The horse and the donkey will create the mule, but the mule is a dead end because of sterility. This proves that evolution doesn't work.
No, it proves that you and your friend SableChicken have got it completely backwards.
Take species A and species B, put them together, make species C. Then turn it upside down on your head and show us that this is the only way that it could possibly be. Is it 2 lineages splitting off into one?
No, two lineages would split into four. But we're not talking about hybridizing two species that already exist. We're talking about deriving specialized subsets from more generalized fossil forms. In other words, we're not talking about two species blending into one. We're talking about one lineage diverging into two, and then perhaps into four, and then so on.
Aaron, what you want me to do is to come up with something that's untestable. And if it's untestable, I can't do it, neither can you.
But I have already done it, and so could you, because I'm talking about something that is all too easily testable, like the situation with Ida. We already knew from our understanding of taxonomy that strepsirrhines and haplorhines were both subsets of a larger clade of primates. Now, creationism offers no explanation for this or anything else, but evolution does, and a monophyletic evolutionary model demands that there must be a common ancestor of both modern branches, linking them to the most primitive primates from roughly 56 million years ago. We looked at the traits held in common by both modern groups that were not yet in place at the base of their tree, and predicted what traits we would need to see in the transitional species between them. And as I already explained, Darwinius Massillé met those requirements. Now try again. Give me any two species which science considers closely related, and this time give me what I asked for. What would you expect of a transitional link between them, be it a common ancestor or a link between a modern and already known basal form from the fossil record? What would you accept as a transitional species?